Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, gave a joint session of Congress speech yesterday in Washington, D.C., that was received in one hand with thunderous applause and great acclaim, but from other quarters, something very nearly the exact opposite. And to try and break down this diplomatic confusion, we have the best person I can think of, and that's Ambassador Chaz Freeman. Welcome back to the show again. Ambassador, I'm just curious right off the top, even before we get into some of the specifics and details, what is your assessment of what happened at the Capitol yesterday?
Well, I think it was a defilement of our national capital. And I believe it has done huge further damage to our image internationally. At the very moment that more pain and suffering is being inflicted on Gaza, our Congress, invited this mass murderer, liar, Orwellian master of deceit, to come and address them. If you ever doubted that the United States was complicitous in the horrors being inflicted on Palestinians and the racism and apartheid being practiced by Israel, any doubt has now been eliminated.
Well, and man, especially coming from a diplomat, those are really strong words. And so I want to get into a little bit of why you say that. And then I'm going to show some clips. I think we'll just show our audience exactly why. And I think people will start to come to understand, because there's been this reflexive for many years now, even since October 7th, there's been this reflexive deference to Israel, because we have been, and our media has been completely told for so long that, Israel was the sole democracy in the Middle East, and, we needed to protect them, and they're the good guys. And so all the other people who were against them must be the bad guys. And then, of course, all the way back to the World War II, where the horrific anti-Semitism that was going on with the Holocaust and all of that. So for some good reason, a lot of people have had deference to Israel, but things have been changing that I think a lot of people are not aware of. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to kind of what has changed in the understanding of the American public from, say, the decades before October 7th until now.
Well, the Holocaust, which was the ultimate expression of anti-Semitism, was a horror, and anti-Semitism is despicable. And for a long time, this experience gave Israel, which was established in the wake of the Holocaust, a free pass. It was not subject to international law. It was not subject to normal rules of morality. It could do whatever it wanted, and we would back it. All of us as young people, myself included, admired Israel. We all read Leon Uris' Exodus. We believed this was a humane expression of Judaism, which is a humane religion, and that it was a safe haven for the world's Jews. But as it has turned out, it has become a gross perversion of Judaism in many ways. Zionism is the negation of Judaism. Many Jews consider it idolatry, that is, the worship of a state rather than the worship of God. But more particularly, as Israel has persisted in its effort to ethnically cleanse Palestine, to eliminate the Palestinians, to deny their existence, to deny them the right of self-determination that Israeli Jews have demanded, correctly, the Israeli sense of morality, the restraints on Israeli behavior have progressively evaporated. And what we see now in Israel doing is absolutely disgusting to any decent human being. And most of the world, with the exception of a few countries like our own, have broken with Israel, see Israel as an outlaw. And in fact, the International Court of Justice, the World Court, just ruled that it was an outlaw in every sense.
Yeah.
That its very existence in the West Bank and Gaza is utterly illegal. There is a tentative charge of genocide against it. Mr. Netanyahu flew directly to the United States because he didn't dare stop anywhere where he might have been arrested and as a war criminal.
Yeah,
so here we are. Yeah. And I think this is what The world has woken up. Israel has not. Israel is stumbling into the abyss, which is very sad.
And I'm going to actually just cover all of those things here in the remainder of this this episode here. But I want to jump right into some of the things Netanyahu said, because one of the things he directly referred to the ICJ ruling, or one of them anyway, and countered it. And so I'd just like your response to this first one. Roll the tape.
The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has shamefully accused Israel of deliberately starving the people of Gaza. This is utter, complete nonsense. It's a complete fabrication. Israel has enabled more than 40,000 aid trucks to enter Gaza. That's 500,000 tons of food. And that's more than 3,000 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza. If there are Palestinians in Gaza who aren't getting enough food, it's not because Israel is blocking it, it's because Hamas is stealing it.
Now, that's a little interesting, because that flies directly in the face of American reporting when this pier issue that disastrously fell apart, when we claimed that only 400 aid trucks went over about a month period of time instead of the 500 per day that was required for the daily caloric requirements, 400 over about a month on 16 days. So according to that, people are starving to death. So how do you square what he said with what we're saying?
Well, he's utterly shameless. He's a blatant liar. His whole approach to the truth is Orwellian. And you just saw it. And this is why Israel no longer has any credibility. And the applause that you heard is why the United States has very little, if any, credibility around the world. How can you applaud blatant lies like that with a straight face?
Yeah, and so what is your understanding of the truth in terms of the food? Despite what he said, he said 3,000 calories per person per day per person. He didn't say per day. That's the assumption. But that I don't see any evidence of that. What is the truth on the food amount?
The truth is that the trucks aren't getting in at all. The truth is that the United States farcically attempted to bypass Israeli obstructionism with a pier floating off the beach in Gaza, and that didn't work. And it actually ended up delivering the equivalent of 1 day of the normal deliveries over the whole course of its existence. And we have now abandoned it. Nothing is getting into Gaza. The hospitals have been destroyed. There's no medical care. Israel has now discovered that there's polio in Gaza, but it's blocking the vaccine. This man is a mass murderer at a level of evil we have not seen since Adolf Hitler in the 1930s.
That's shocking to even say out loud, much less to be true. But as we see that we're not done with the double standards and lies. We're going to continue on here. One of the big charges that a lot of people who are on Israel's side accused the Palestinians and Hamas in particular of saying, you want to wipe out Israel. You want to be able to control things from the river to the sea. And that's a shameful thing to say, which Netanyahu pointed out like this.
These protesters chant from the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about. They call Israel a colonialist state? Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled? For nearly 4,000 years, the land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home.
Okay, a lot to break down there. But first of all, I want to focus in on the whole river to the sea issue, because that was one of the things he just railed on and pounded his fist on the lectern. But there's one thing about this whole Palestinian claim about the river to the sea that is a little interesting when you look at what Netanyahu himself said earlier this year.
In the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends.
So if the river to the sea is a bad thing, is it only a bad thing for one people? Because it seems like he has a different view.
The phrase from the river to the sea actually is in his party, Likud, charter. And it means exactly what he just said, that there is no room for anyone other than Israelis in this space, in his view. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, Jews always lived in the Holy Land. They were there under the Ottomans. They were there prior to the colonial project of Zionism, which was explicitly colonialist and which remains colonialist in the sense that it is mistreating, evicting, setting aside, and murdering the indigenous inhabitants of Palestine. The slogan of the Zionists was a people without land for a land without people. But Palestine had people. It still does. So this is utterly racist, utterly despicable, and it has no credibility outside the true believers in Zionism. So it's a shame that he would make this kind of argument, and it's an even greater shame that he would get applause for it. Now, let me conclude. My children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren have the Lenni Lenape blood. The Lenni Lenapes were the tribe that foolishly gave Manhattan to the Dutch. They had lived there for thousands of years. I think it's time that we give it back to the Lenni Lenapes. I mean, let's be reasonable.
Totally fair.
This is just a kind of arrogance, hubris, racist supremacy, which is just unacceptable in the 21st century.
Or at least it ought to be.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to make a claim. It's another thing to deny self-determination to other people, to deny security to them, to deny the pursuit of happiness to them, and to murder them. You may have some claim to live in Palestine. Yes, fine. You don't have a claim to murder people, to deny them their rights. So this is, again, our identification with this is disastrous for us internationally and morally.
Because it used to be a hallmark of Americanism that we stood for self-determination, that we stood for helping the people who were powerless, so that they had, the ability to survive, to have freedoms and liberty, etc. But that seems to have been put on pause or just ignored in this particular case. Now, another area where that's been ignored is supposed to be freedom of speech. And so we should have always championed the ability of people to say what they think, to hold the views that they want, except even in America, if they're chanting for the wrong things that the popular people don't like. Netanyahu also talked about this. Now, there's been a lot of protests over the last several months, famously at Harvard and several other major universities. And they've been demonized. A lot of these kids who, many of whom, I think probably a significant majority of whom have been arguing for the Palestinian people, but they've been turned into saying no, that they're actually for Hamas. And all these are characterized as pro-Hamas and now pro-Iranian. And here's what Netanyahu said about these American people yesterday.
For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Now that's one of the ones that I personally found reprehensible, that got that explosive applause from everyone right there. He has called American people who were protesting useful idiots, and that's all of them. Now, those particular ones that are right there, there was a lot of scuffling going on with police. That was at the also just outside the Capitol, not far from it, at Union Station. They defaced a lot of public property, et cetera. So I know some people don't like that, but those people also don't like the fact that the Palestinian people are being killed, as you pointed out right there. And to call them useful idiots and to say that they're all Iranian backed, and then we got that applause, I found reprehensible.
He has no evidence at all of Iranian involvement or funding of protests that I think are admirable expressions of the younger generation of Americans' moral indignation at genocide. They are not pro-Hamas. They are anti-genocide. And I think there's a terrible irony in an Israeli murderer, war criminal, coming to the United States, blatantly interfering in American internal affairs and politics, and charging Iran with doing so, on the basis of no evidence. There is no greater manipulator of American politics than Israel. We talk about Russiagate, the Russians or the Chinese or somebody trying to manipulate our electoral process. The most egregious perpetrator of such manipulation is Israel and its unregistered lobby in AIPAC and other Zionist Organization of America and others who take direction from the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Israel and implement it. This is exposing the level of manipulation of American politics directly. And useful idiots is an interesting phrase.
Right.
I think it applies to those people in
Right.
the Congress who facilitated this show, which is designed mainly to keep Mr. Netanyahu in office, despite the fact that he's surrounded by fascists and a majority of Israelis want him out. Here he is staging a rally with members of Congress as props. Useful idiots, yes.
Yeah.
They have disgraced this country. I cannot recall a moment when I felt, and by the way, I'm not speaking as a diplomat, I'm speaking as an American and somebody who feels strongly about the
Yes.
importance of this country and is distressed at the extent to which it is now dysfunctional. And I cannot remember a more dysfunctional display than what you just put on.
Well, that was the last one I had, but there is at least one more we got to cover. You said earlier in this episode that anti-Semitism is a terrible thing, and it is justly condemned. But Netanyahu wanted to address anti-Semitism, and it's very interesting the way he characterizes it, because according to him, there's no reason for it to be. It's just out of nowhere. These darn people are being mean to Jews around the world. When he said this.
Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state. No, don't applaud. Listen. The outrageous slanders that paint Israel as racist and genocidal are meant to delegitimize Israel, to demonize the Jewish state, and to demonize Jews everywhere. And no wonder we've witnessed an appalling rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. My friends, whenever and wherever we see the scourge of anti-Semitism, we must unequivocally condemn it and resolutely fight it, without exception.
Again, I just can't help but cringe as I watch that clip right there, because it just brings to mind what you just said about Congress being used as props. I mean, he literally said, "Hey, yeah, don't clap yet. Hang on, do this," and then everybody went okay until he got to his applause line, and then he just cut it loose, literally like they're props in a play.
Well, he's of course twisting reality entirely. The paranoid are very good at making enemies. The Zionists are very good at producing anti-Semitism. That's what they're producing. It is not the charge that Israel is conducting genocide, which is well-founded, which has been examined legally, internationally, and found to be plausible. It is not that is delegitimizing Israel. It is the conduct of genocide. It is the fact that the victims of genocide, the greatest horror of the 20th century, are now perpetrating it themselves. This is simply unacceptable. And his statements are absolutely, George Orwell would have cringed to hear this level of distortion coming from somebody with a distinguished diplomatic and political career. I think, I'm very sorry for Israelis. This man has led Israel to the abyss. There are many decent people in Israel. A lot of them have left recently because they're concerned about what is happening in Israel and what is happening under this man's leadership. And they object to what Israeli soldiers have been doing in Gaza and what settlers have been doing in the occupied West Bank. There are many decent people in Israel. They have been betrayed by this man. They have been betrayed by him and his colleagues. And he is risking the very existence of the state of Israel, which he claims to be defending.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that I think it was on Tuesday, there was a big demonstration inside the Capitol by Jews that were opposing the very things that you're talking about. That not somebody that was anti-Semitic. Jews themselves were standing up and saying, we do not agree with what this man is saying. I thought that was very noteworthy.
Well, I admire the Jewish tradition of speaking truth to power. And I don't think it has ever been quite as evident as it is in these acts of conscience by American Jews. I applaud them. The fact that Mr. Netanyahu condemns them as spokespeople for Iran is worse than absurd. It is a gross slander. Here we have Orthodox Jews who do not believe that the state of Israel should exist. That is a position that I don't take, but that is their position. They have a right to say that. They're Americans. They're not Stooges for Iran. So this whole thing is thoroughly disgusting.
I want to shift in the time we have left here. You mentioned a couple of times a new International Criminal Court justice ruling. For those who may not have seen it, I want to quickly show what it was, and then I want to get your views on the backside. Watch this.
Illegal Israeli settlements have been steadily expanding in Palestinian territories for years. Now, the UN's top court says it's time for Israel to stop, reverse course, and repair the damages. The International Court of Justice has ruled Israel's occupation is unlawful and is fueling a surge in violence. However, the court's findings are not legally binding, and the Israeli government has ignored previous decisions.
And I want to show you just a short clip of what the judge himself actually said in the ruling to get some specific comments. Watch this.
With respect to the policies and practices of Israel referred to in question A, which were found to be unlawful, Israel has an obligation to put an end to those unlawful acts. In this respect, Israel must immediately cease all new settlement activity. Israel also has an obligation to repeal all legislation and measures creating or maintaining the unlawful situation, including those which discriminate against the Palestinian people.
So to undo all of the Israeli settlers, et cetera, in the occupied areas, obviously would be a radical transformation of everything that's been going on. And obviously Netanyahu has no intention to do any of that. What is the practical implications of this ruling? And since, as they said, it's not a binding situation, but what impact can it have?
Well, it is guidance to the international community. And indeed, at the end of the opinion, the court declares that it is the responsibility of all the members of the United Nations to act in accordance with the finding that Israel is an outlaw, that it has been stealing land, murdering people, conducting an apartheid regime, and that it is essentially beyond the pale, if you will. So what is happening, the significance of this court decision is that it will inspire the boycott, divest, and sanction movement, the BDS movement, and it will lead to a break in relations with Israel on the practical level as well as at the formal level, by more and more countries. Some have already done that, of course, in response to the horrors of the genocide in Gaza. But now the international community has spoken and declared Israel to be a pariah, an outlaw. And when, you know what happens to outlaws? People organize posses against them if there's no law enforcement. So I think, you know, this is an invitation to the General Assembly of the UN, which asked the court to examine the issues and render its opinion, to take action. And it has within the UN Charter the ability to do so. The UN Charter provides that no country that is a party to a dispute may vote on that dispute. Well, the United States has been blocking everything in the Security Council with a veto. But strictly reading the UN Charter, we are a party to this. We have made ourselves a party to it. And we could be deprived of that veto power under the UN Charter.
That would also be
I don't think that will happen. But I mention it because it is legally possible. And it is, I think you can expect a great deal of international action to isolate, ostracize Israel. And Mr. Netanyahu's speech, far from combating that, was directed mainly at hardline voters in Israel and at the Stooges that the U.S. members of Congress have become. I note that 80 of them did not attend.
Yeah.
And that's to their credit. But those who did attend and applauded should be ashamed.
And there seems to be already some movement. And I guess, if anything, this could facilitate a continuing trend to give more people cover to actually do some things. For example, even in the Israeli press, they've been showing recently how Germany has been distancing itself a little bit from its previous reflexive, just pro whatever you want. As this one, Haratz was talking about goodbye unconditional support. The rift between Germany and Israel is widening. You also had President Trump, who has not been given this full-throated support like he had been doing. And we'll see how that actually works out if he actually gets back in. But he's like saying, hey, look, just get this war over with fast. He's not saying, I'm just taking your side, and who knows what he would do if he gets into the White House. But like any political animal, if he sees the winds of change going in one direction and he wants to get elected, he may go in that direction. But now, as I know you talk about all the time, a lot of the Israeli money that's going into campaigns is putting a lot of cash into anybody like the Stooges that you talked about there. So that's going to be a countervailing weight in the United States, but it's not unconditional. And I wonder what you thought also, speaking of presidential candidates, the fact that Kamala Harris chose to go to a sorority gig instead of sitting in on this membership on this speech here. What do you make of that?
I think she understands that what Israel is doing is intensely unpopular with precisely the groups she has to line up behind her to be elected president. That is young people, that is people of color, that is Arab Americans in Michigan, that is Black Americans in the South, that is churchgoers, that is women who are appalled by far more than men are apparently by what they're seeing, to the extent they see it at all. The world is seeing a great deal more of the genocide than we are because our media is self-censor. But anyway, I think the basic point here is, Danny, and you've nailed it, is there's no longer a viable legal argument for Israel to make about its settlement activity, its apartheid, its discrimination against the Palestinians, its warmongering behavior against its neighbors. No legal argument at all. Israel has gotten by for 74 years with or more with argument 76 years, sorry, with arguments based on spurious interpretations of international law. Those are not tenable anymore. So I think this does change the atmosphere, and it enables those who see Israel as problematic and as almost suicidal in its behavior with the ability to challenge that behavior.
And let me ask you in just the last few minutes we have here, I don't want to get too far away from the genocide claim here. There's a report out in the Israeli press. It's talking about that even if the war ended tomorrow, the deaths that Gazans will face will continue years into the future because of the things that have been done in terms of the lack of care that they've got. According to this right here, 26 out of 36 hospitals in the entire Gaza Strips are not even functional. People have not been able to get treatment for ailments and sicknesses, cancers, et cetera, and that will have an impact longer. Just tell us a little bit about the human toll that this whole issue, that everything that Netanyahu was talking about is covering up.
Well, I note that at the beginning, after October 7, the Israelis made quite an effort to discredit the so-called Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza. Of course it was Hamas-controlled. That was the government in Gaza. Now they've stopped that. Why? Because other studies of the death toll in Gaza have put it at close to 200,000, not 40,000.
Oh, my.
And so suddenly the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza is providing a lower figure, and we need to accept that. So we don't question it anymore. But the fact is, the Lancet said 186,000 Palestinians are probably dead under the rubble. An enormous number of Palestinian dead are buried in that rubble. No one knows how many, but that is probably a pretty good estimate. And of course, let us remember that the purpose of this war, although Netanyahu says it should be prosecuted until Hamas is destroyed, is to destroy the Palestinian people in Gaza, to annihilate them, to depopulate it. And we have people running around the United States now selling beachfront property in Gaza to American Jews who might want to move to Israel. Who the hell assigned Gaza to Israel? Under what pretext is it that Palestinians there have no voice in their future? And here I would note that, oddly enough, at this very moment, that Netanyahu is discrediting the United States by appearing in the Congress. Beijing, the Chinese, have just convened 14 Palestinian factions and patched up the relationship between Fatah, which runs the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and Hamas. And the Palestinians will insist on a voice, the decisive voice, in their own future. They will not accept something imposed by us, still less something imposed by Israel.
Yeah, and I think that these ICJ rulings will probably help galvanize that around the world, whether we want to or not.
Exactly.
We have to leave it there for right now. But so much value coming on today, and really giving clarity to this issue that a lot of Americans have clouded because of the intentional efforts of those who would like to have a different outcome. But we thank you for bringing the truth and speaking truth to power. Thank you for coming on today.
Next time, pick a happy topic, please.
I will try. I really will. And thank you guys for being with us today. Be sure and like and subscribe. And we will be back to you later on today with Professor John J. Mearsheimer, who's going to be talking about what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine war. Is it moving towards peace or more war? Don't miss that. Tune in today at, I think it's 4 p.m. this afternoon. We'll talk to you later. See you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.